Hey guys, welcome back to Honkai Star Rail. In today's video, I want to do a bit of a fun one and look at the global tier list from Pridewin against a CN tier list from a Billy channel that I've been watching that looks like they're doing some pretty deep theory crafting and stuff in the game. So that'll be fun to put them side by side. Two reasons. One, I just like looking at this stuff, seeing how different communities and different echo chambers go about things, because you'll find that different communities sort of gravitate towards different things depending on what people have found worked. So I like looking across the board at different things for this. Also, it's a nice bit of pure copium because if your hero's low on one list, just look at the other list that they're higher on and you're happy. Unless your favorite's Herder. Rip. That's all I got. Another thing I want to mention is that I look at tier, like I see a lot of people when they see tier lists and they look at it like that is it, that is final. I never look at a tier list like it's final. It is completely subjective, but I like looking at these in terms of the psychology of the player base, where the development of the game is at. And you got to remember, we're still at level 60. Some people are just getting up to level 70 on their characters now. So these things are 100% going to fluctuate a lot. So I look at looking at these as like a state of the game type thing and where progression is at. So don't look at this and go, oh, my character's low. I still 100% recommend building whoever you like, whoever you enjoy. I still stand by the fact that I don't think they made a single bad starter 5-star in the game. I think they all have their uses. Now we'll see on these tier lists that Himiko is low. I also believe that that is due to where we are in the current state of the game, like I said, and I feel like later on Himiko will definitely come up. And like I said, it's just going to go through cycles on which ones are good, except for things like Zilla, who's just always going to be good, essentially. But let's jump into it. I wanted to take a look. So as I said, links to both of these will be in the description, so you can take a look at them and see what you want. But first of all, I've put these into tiers. The biggest criticism I saw of the Pridewin tier list was their tiers, and I've said that before that there just gets too many S's. It's like let's just. But for me, I don't care what you could have this lettering as 8 S's, 6 S's. I don't care. I just look at them as like top, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. That's all I look at. I don't even pay attention to the letters. So not going to get caught up in semantics. The CN one does theirs in tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, and stuff like that. I've just laid it out like this because this is what I feel comfortable with. So also because the CN version had less tiers than the global version, I decided to lay it out like this because if we look at here, that matched that both the A's were the ones consolidated with a bunch of the same characters in a chunky little group, which works out pretty well. So generally across the board, everything's within like one tier of each other. There's a few that I want to look at specifically that have jumped a couple tiers because I feel like one tier fluctuation between people's opinions is perfectly normal. When we start getting like 2 tiers worth of discrepancy, those are the ones I really want to talk about. Now, first of all, I want to jump to Jing Yuan because a lot of people are asking me about Jing Yuan at the moment. I kind of want to wait to see until they release his skills and stuff before I talk too much. But you know, I'll probably do something talking about him with massive disclaimers at the start. But essentially, from the beta, he was an AoE nuker, but also had fantastic single target damage. And we saw in the beta a lot of people just hyper carrying him or hyper carrying Zilla, and they can both do similar things where they clap all the ads and then they clap the boss as well. And that's pretty much the way it works. Now, he's a lot more skill efficient than Zilla. They're a bit different, but in general, he's an absolute savage, and they've left him in there based on what they currently know of his skills. So that's the first one I wanted to cover. Now, moving on from that, the first one that we see that's jumped 2 tiers, and I want to mention, is going to be Clara. Now, I have mentioned before that Clara was one from like the very start of beta where I was on a push to get her into quadruple S tier on Pridewin's tier list because I just loved Clara. Now, I think with this, now keep in mind this CN tier list was made about a week ago, whereas the global tier list was made about, I want to say 3 to 4 days ago. So I have seen more CN players start to use Clara, so maybe she would get bumped up. And she is one that I definitely like putting up higher. She just, when you got a character that can just deal damage, not disregarding turn, and she can have her ult up so much time, and she's both offensive and defensive support because she's taking the aggro to get more damage, but also to avoid your allies taking damage. She just works so well, and I definitely prefer her up in this global side of things as opposed to where they've rated her. Now, once again, this comes down to that maybe it was early days. A lot of the CN community I think they've got bigger whales in the CN community than we do over here on Global. So like they get into more like top tier type stuff. However, the one thing I will mention is I found it interesting that they didn't have an actual physical breaker or physical damage dealer in any of their higher tiers. Whether it's that they just don't rate physical at the moment and don't see it as a need. Because I also really like Su Shang as a physical breaker as well. But they've both got those both in B, so maybe they weren't seeing the need for it at this stage. When you see they've got something like Hook up there, I feel a bit sad for Himiko when Hook's 2 tiers above. But a lot of people would have Hook at that max Eidolon due to the first banner, which is definitely going to help Hook's performance in my opinion. So that was an interesting one to look at. Like I said, having the Clara down the bottom. I definitely think Clara, if you want to play comfortably, put her in A, but I do think she's probably one of the best DPS. I'm hearing a lot more about Yang Qing being number one after everyone was saying Yang Qing was trash. So let's just wait and see. I've always thought that Yang Qing had his place, against a boss that you could freeze and then you never had to worry about getting hit, or if you have something like Japan that has chunky enough shields. I also think with March there is a situation for Yang Qing. However, it's a bit more skill point draining and a bit harder to keep up, and you're not looking after the rest of the team like you are with Japard. But hey, that's another story. Let's move on to the next one that I want to talk about. This one isn't a 2-spot jump, but I just like looking at this because for me, Asta versus Pella. Over here on the CN version, they've got Asta rated higher than Pella, and over here on the global version, we've got Pella above Asta. Now, when I made my tier list pre-launch, I talked about how I didn't want to separate those two because I felt like they're both really good supportive units, not quite at the same level for me personally as Ting Yun or like Bronya or something like that, but those two just felt like they were similar rate of power. And I feel like this sort of demonstrates that. It just depends what you like using. Now, me personally, on my free-to-play account where I'm only using 4 stars, I don't have a Pella yet, so I am using an Asta because it's the only supportive character that I've got. And I absolutely love her. The big difference was I chucked an energy rope on her, which at this stage of the game is really helpful. It allows me... I just noticed I kept being like, 5 energy off of my ultimate. So putting that energy rope on her really helped her to get her ultimates off and keep that uptime up a lot more. The other thing with Asta is... she's the one unit in the game that I just always, I default to putting break effect set on her because she has got that multi-hit, which is fantastic. Whereas we look at Pella can stack 3 defense breaks. She can stack her technique with her ultimate with the Nihility Light Cone, which is really powerful defense shred considering all those stack and provide a lot of damage increase. She's got the strip on her skill, which is really handy for a lot of bosses, removing those annoying buffs that they're going to nuke your team with and stuff like that. And in general, she's a good skill point generator. So overall, I really like both of them. Like I said, it was just, like I said, interesting to see, one above the other in each tier list, which was just something that, made me really think that, maybe it is sort of, maybe if we put them on the same level, they do sort of match up there pretty well. And the next thing I wanted to look at was the general rating of shielding characters. So if we look over here in global, we've got the S for both Japard and Fire Trailblazer, and then March in A. Whereas over here in the CN version, or the CN list, let's call it, we've got Japard and the Fire MC at A, while we have March at B. So everything's down a tier. To me, that just represents that they're not representing shielding characters as much, and that might be down to one of two things. One, they're sort of looking at more of a Giga Whaling type territory where it's not as important and they're trying to get 3 stars, and that could be it. The other thing is that, they could be basing it more on where they see the future of the game being, once you're level 80 and stuff like that. Whereas the global is more based around where the game's currently at. Because at the moment, when we look at Chaos Memory, people are trying to push, well, at least when this was made, people were trying to push Chaos Memory at level 60. And when you're at level 60, you're 20 levels below where you could be. Your light cones are 20 levels below where they could be. You're losing a lot of stats. So survival is much more important. So getting those chunky shields from something like Japard is absolutely huge when you're pushing a high deficit. Whereas maybe we go into more of an offensive build once we get to level 80 and we got gear and all that sort of stuff. And that's another thing that I talk about when I mentioned at the start, the cycles of how things play through, depending on where you are, what is good. Right now, we're looking at more so just trying to clear stages in Chaos Memory as opposed to 3-starring them. So your defensive is going to be much more important because people are just dying. And then as we get further, as we get closer to level 80, we get maxed out light cones, we get better gear and stuff like that. Then it's going to shift more offensive where you're trying to get those 3 stars, and playing with 2 defensive units is probably going to cost you the time to get those 3 stars. And that's where things will start to shift. And then maybe priorities start to change. So like I said, I just really like looking at that, looking at the differences in communities, and obviously no one likes Herta. So Takura-Kura's out there, you know, we'll get there. Hey, if you're just farming and you've got Himiko as well, S tier, don't worry about it. You know, you've got the dream, but yeah, poor Herta. But like I said, always take tier lists with a grain of salt. It's all subjective, but I like especially looking at them side by side like this because it's the same game, different communities, different opinions, and it's just fun to discuss the differences. I always say, build what you want, build what you enjoy. QQ family for life because she is the queen, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you have an awesome day, and I look forward to seeing the next one. Cheers.